Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's good ready. This Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. I'm not even exaggerating when I say I didn't want to do this today. I've made no secret in past episodes my feelings towards net neutrality. I hate taking this show down a political road. I hate taking conversations down a political road. And I've expressed this time and time and time again. Why that is. The moment anything goes into politics, you start dealing with how information is twisted in order to gain power. It is difficult for anything to be shown in a truthful light when it comes to politics. This is fact. But we gotta talk about that. We're gonna save that for the last burb segment. So we're gonna talk about net neutrality at the very end of the podcast. So for those of you who are like me and really don't want to talk about politics at all, you know, it'll be at the very end. The moment we come to that segment, you can just click off and just look forward to a new episode where hopefully I want to talk about net neutrality again for a very long time. Instead, let's talk about some good and bad news out of ATT. Because, you know, that can't be better. So, this actually is nowhere near as bad as it sounds like. You think, oh no, some bad news involving AT&T. You're expecting something close to what net neutrality is going to end up being. It's not, actually. I'll start with the good news, because the article I have here from PC Purse starts with the bad news. The good news is that AT&T is testing broadband over power lines. This could be very interesting. This is talking about getting high-speed internet over existing power lines to hopefully get up to 1 gigabit per second. Now, you'd be thinking, what's the point? You've already got internet lines in place. Not in rural areas. Out in, like, farmland country. Places like that. All you got are power lines going to houses. That's it. So that actually could be a major portion of bringing those who are normally isolated from the real world. Oh, no, I shouldn't say from the real world. From the rest of the world is a better way of phrasing it. And getting them the connection to communicate with everyone else. It's very fascinating, and actually, I am legitimately curious how it's going to work. It's actually a technology that could really help out a lot of people just out in the middle of nowhere that have no way to contact people except by phone. So we'll keep an eye on that one, without a doubt. Now for the bad news. The DirecTV kit boxes have a serious code injection problem. It is possible to gain complete access of the boxes remotely through the internet. And also to infect the boxes. And also, you guessed it, put them onto a botnet. Now, before I say this next thing, I want to point out, I am not sponsored by anyone. The only people who sponsor me, who support me, are those who subscribe on Twitch. And one of them is not Norton. Alright, I want to get that out of the way before I make my next comment. This actually, the fact that now that cable boxes can now be confirmed to be taken over, in addition to thermostat, light bulbs, electronic locks, and just about anything else in the vast world of the Internet of Things, is why better security needs to be brought onto the router level. The router, remember, is the one hub that connects everything in your house to the outside world. It is the one choke point in that regard. And for the most part, there's not been a whole lot of security. Norton has been for a while working on a router that does provide extra layers of security to help block these sort of attacks on the router level. And that could be the answer to a lot of the problems we've been seeing with the increase and the rise of botnets taking over light bulbs and other such things. Like I said, this is not a sponsor, this isn't a ad for Norton at all. I'm saying Norton's got the right idea, and I would love to see other router makers go in this direction. Go partner up with other security firms, or do the research yourselves. Put this layer of security on the router, and you could stop a lot of the problems with light bulbs being used for botnets and being used for DDoS attacks and being used for malicious hacking attacks that I haven't mentioned. So, there you go. See? Nothing too terrible out of AT&T. This is really a very positive article. It's, oops, there's a vulnerability, and we're working on it, and testing internet over power lines. Nothing bad with that. It's very good that AT&T actually went and admitted this sort of stuff. That's great. It's also great that Patreon has realized that their recent payment restructuring isn't good. So I didn't report on this when it was announced last week, just because I didn't know a whole lot. There was an announcement that got to me just before I went on the air, so I didn't have time to research it. But what was happening was Patreon was redoing the way their fee structure works. What they were doing was they were charging a flat amount, plus I think a small percentage, on top of the pledge. I think it was, I can't remember exactly what it was. And I feel bad that I didn't grab that first, but honestly, a lot of my time and show prep today went to net neutrality. For obvious reasons. I believe it was something like 60 cents plus like a 0.5% or something like that. Might have been more. Let me actually take a look at that real quick. Live research, why not? Patreon blog. There we go. Updating the payment fee structures. All right, it was 35 cents plus 2.9. All right, there was a service fee of 2.9% plus 35 cents plus the Patreon fee of 5%. Okay, before the transaction fee was 2 to 10% and the Patreon fee was 5%. The Patreon fee is, of course, how Patreon turns a profit and can continue to exist. The service fee structure, that's actually very common. the flat cent amount plus 2.9%, that's about average for a credit card transaction fee. As someone who has been in the business before of taking credit cards, that's about right. The old fee of 2 to 10%, that's just a way of having people who make bigger pledges help pay the transaction fee of those who do smaller ones. Alright, and that in part is kinda unfair to those who make the bigger ones, because you're basically paying the transaction fee for the smaller guys. So the new system, which would have been 35 cents plus 2.9%, which is pretty much exactly what credit card companies usually charge, that would have caused creators to take home 95%, whereas the old model, which is the model that's currently in place, would cause creators to only take in 85 to 93%. So, the logic was, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to cause creators to take in more, right? The thing to remember is that the service fee... Well, actually, no. Here's where the problem starts coming in. The old way of doing it, there was nothing added to your pledge. Okay? The transaction fee and the Patreon fee was just cut out of the total amount. So let's say you pledged $1 to help me get a mic fund. Alright? I don't even know if that exists. I'm just pulling that off the top of my head. You pledge $1 to it, alright? That's all it is. You pledge $1. Alright, and then the Patreon fee and the transaction fee is taken out of that, and then the creator sees 85 cents. The new method, the service fee is added. So that $1 fee now becomes... Let's do the math here real quick. $1 times 1.029. Oh, duh. That was stupid. That becomes $1.03 plus 35 cents. So now your $1 pledge is now $1.37. Ouch. The amount you paid now just went up 37%. So, of course, everyone shouted from the rooftops, "Oh, this is insane. This is crazy." Because what Patreon tried to do is that they tried to pass off the service fee as something that the consumer pays. And normally in the credit card transaction world, that's not something that is normally seen. But at the same time, it is. Kinda. That sort of fee is always passed off on the consumer, no matter what. For example, let's actually take my stream, for instance, on Twitch. For the longest time, if you wanted to donate directly to me, which I call tips, or we'll say tip directly. If you want to tip directly to me, I used to take a minimum of $1. Well, I ran into the same problem. The transaction fees were 35 cents plus 3%. So all of a sudden, that $1 tip, I'd only see 60 cents of it. So I raised the minimum to $1.50. Because otherwise, it was just silly. Almost more of the money, a good chunk of the money was just going to PayPal. And as someone who thought they were donating to me, they weren't really at all. So, in short, if you weren't able to figure out what the heck I was saying in all of that rambling, because I know I went back and forth quite a lot. Patreon is right now trying to find a way to get around getting hosed by credit card transaction fees. They came up with this old system, which tacked on extra on top of what people were pledging. People didn't like that. They complained. Patreon is switching back. And are now looking to try a different way. If I had to guess, Patreon is probably switching who their credit card processor is, which is the reason they were switching the service fee. More than likely, you're going to see this as the service fees just going to be included in content creators' take home about what they are right now. Content creators currently take home 85 to 93%. They're just going to end up taking home 31% or 32%. 32% minus 35 cents. Which, if that does end up happening, if my prediction is correct, what you're going to see a lot more of is minimum pledges going up to about $1.50. Much like with what happened to the tipping system on my own Twitch stream. The other thing that's good to see in this, Patreon did very much listen to their user base, which is very good. More and more companies need to do this. And, in fairness, most are. Let's switch to a completely different topic. Been talking about how other companies are. Let's talk about something that, well, a company did release, and it's kind of surprising this exists. Western Digital has now released the 12 terabyte gold hard drive. That's right. 12 terabytes of hard drive space. That's crazy. That is literally crazy. In order to get that sort of space onto one drive before, you'd be raiding together probably 6 2 terabyte drives. And granted, a lot of the focus on the storage world has been on SSDs, the performance that they can provide. It's good to see that hard drive makers are still making massive hard drives. Especially in a world where we're focusing more and more on cloud-based storage, on storing our stuff off our computers. And in the same world where the more and more we store stuff off our computers, the more and more those servers get hacked and have our data stolen. It's not the worst time in the world to invest on 1 or 2 really big hard drives and store your most important stuff on that. But here's a pro tip. If you are going to do that, do raid them. And put them on a raid 1. Do not, under any circumstances, raid 0 your hard drives. Raid 1, raid 5, or raid 6. And of course, raid 5 or raid 6, you need more than 2 drives. You're going to need 3 or 4, respectively. So, that's it. 12 terabyte drive. Now, granted, Toshiba already made a 14 terabyte drive. But granted, the 14 terabyte drive is helium sealed and is for enterprise customers. This 12 terabyte one, nothing nearly as fancy as that, and it is more in reach to the average consumer. So that's nice to see. Very nice. Speaking of stuff that's way too expensive, let's talk about the Titan V. And how, just judging by the performance numbers, it is very clear that the Titan has stopped trying to pretend it is a gaming card. Alright, we talked about the Titan V last week. 5,120 CUDA cores. But one of the specs I didn't talk about, and wasn't really brought to my attention, was the floating point 64 cores. These are cores that are usually used for professional application. To put in comparison, the GTX 1080 has 2,560 CUDA cores, but only 80 floating point 64 cores. The Titan XP has 3840 CUDA cores and only 120 floating point 64 cores. Titan V 5,120 CUDA cores, 2,560 floating point 64 cores. That is a massive jump. And I do mean massive. The rest of the specs are very close to what we expected. 1200 megahertz base clock, 1455 megahertz boost clock, 320 texture units, 96 ROP units, 12 gigabytes of memory. Granted, that's HB memory. That's on the die. PC Per, where this information comes from, took apart one of these graphic cards. And you can see, much like with some of the Vega cards, the RAM is on the GPU die itself. There is no longer RAM on the card. That means they can make this GPU, they can make this graphic card and make it smaller, because you don't need the actual board space for the RAM anymore. It's now on the die. Granted, that means the die is enormous. But anyway. Memory bandwidth is much higher. Memory interface. Just to show the number difference between the old method and the new method. The Titan XP, which use GDDR5 RAM in the G5X format, memory interface was 384-bit. Vega used 2048-bit HBM2 RAM. The Titan V beats AMD at their own game with 3072-bit HBM2 memory interface. This results in memory bandwidth of 653 gigabytes per second. Not gigabits, gigabytes. Now, granted, even the older style at only 256 gigabytes per second is still so much memory bandwidth that it's a non-issue. It's like putting a Hot Wheels car through the Grand Canyon. You're fine. But here is where the performance picture gets very interesting. Okay? we're going to talk teraflops. This is the unit of measurement to show computing power. As a benchmark, the GTX 1070, a graphic card that a lot of you might even have in your rigs right now, a fairly above average card, gets 5.7 teraflops. The GTX 1080 gets 8.2. 1080 Ti, 11.3 teraflops. Titan XP, 12.1 teraflops. Vega, 13.1 teraflops. The Titan V gets 12.2 base teraflops, but when boosted gets 14.9 teraflops. Okay, so, a little bit of an improvement, but not drastic, It definitely gets up there. It definitely will compete with the best GPUs out there, and it's definitely top dog right now. But it does show that Vega is not going to be as much of a gaming performance rig as much as people thought. So, your 1080 Ti, you're fine. You're definitely fine. Even your 1070, you're going to be pretty good. And there might be, like, a 5% performance increase-ish, is what it seems to be. Well, about 10%, actually. Maybe. We'll see when when Volta comes out on the other GPUs. When we start seeing the GTX 1180s and the 1170s. But what is stunning is peak double precision compute. Once again, measured in teraflops. GTX 1070, 0.17 teraflops. 1080, 0.25 teraflops. Titan XP, 0.37 teraflops. Vega, 0.81 teraflops. This is in double precision, high-end computing for workstations. The Titan V, on the other hand, at base clock, 6.1 teraflops, and at boost clock, 7.45 teraflops. Just shy of 10 times what the Vega can do. And 20 times higher than what the previous generation Titan can do. And the fact that it's a $3,000 graphic card clearly shows this is not a gaming card. As pretty as the Titan V is, the numbers don't lie. This is not built to be for gaming. The Titan line is now closer to the Quadro line. To the line of graphic cards specifically targeting the professional market. That is now blatantly obvious. Now, one thing I'm a little curious about, but not really curious, I have to know, how good is the Titan V at Bitcoin mining? Some absolute crazy person trying to get 8 Titan Vs into a Bitcoin mining rig. Oh, that'd be insane. That would be literally insane. But, anyway, we're going to shift gears completely now. Let's get off the professional GPU world and get into what we thought the iPhone X was going to have, but it didn't. Synaptics has unveiled a fingerprint reader built into a touchscreen. Currently on all phones, there is a space on the phone dedicated as the fingerprint reader. On most iPhones, it's the home button. That area, you rest your finger on it, reads your fingerprint, and unlocks the phone as such. Alright? Samsung's the same way, although I think they moved their fingerprint reader to the back now for some reason. And LG's and other phones moved their fingerprint reader to the back as well. When rumors started surfacing that the iPhone X was not going to have a home button, people thought, myself included, that Apple would do this, would use a much more sensitive touchscreen like Synaptics has just developed to read the fingerprint. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. The iPhone X doesn't have a fingerprint reader on it. It instead relies on Intel's depth sensing camera, the Intel RealSense, to scan your face and unlock the phone that way. So, does this mean that the next generation iPhone, the iPhone 11, in theory, would have the fingerprint reader back, but built into the screen? It's possible. I can guarantee you that Samsung will... Well, I can't guarantee you. I'm 80% positive Samsung will. I would not doubt it at all if the Samsung Galaxy S... What are they on? 9? Galaxy S9 would have this technology built into it. That would not surprise me in the least. But time will tell, and this is not the prediction episode. Prediction episode's yet to come. Now then, and finally before the break, Apple confirms the acquisition of Shazam. Shazam is an application that listens for music and then tells you what it is. No, now, Siri and Google now already have this feature built into it. Like if I was listening to the radio and something came on, like say the bumper music for some talk show, and I'm like, oh, I want to know what that is. I could ask Siri or Google now, what song is that? Hold up, and they'd be able to identify it. Shazam goes one step further. It tries to figure out what you're humming or what you're saying as the music. Like, if I started singing, let's say, Down with the Sickness by Disturbed, which I'm not going to do, by the way, don't worry. Shazam would be able to figure out that's what I'm looking for. So you'd be able to go like, what's that song that goes, or whatever. And it'd be able to figure it out. Apple has now bought out Shazam for $400 million. And it's no secret as to why. I mean, they're not saying, but anyone who can add 2 and 2 and get 4 can figure this out. they're going to incorporate it into Siri. They're going to enhance that aspect of Siri with Shazam. And also incorporate into iTunes. So that way, when you figure out what the is, you can then buy it on iTunes right away. It's almost a guarantee. The next edition of iOS is going to have this feature built into it. Unfortunately, it also means that the name Shazam will be lost in time forever. Alright. That's all the stories I've got. Except for one. You know what it is. So if you don't want to talk about it, and I understand if you don't, now is the time to say take care, rest well, and I'll see you next time. For those of you who do want to talk about net neutrality, stick around after the break. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. Let me go Falcon. Oh, I don't want to do this. And a lot of you would just say, then don't, Eagle. You don't have to. Unfortunately, that's where you're wrong. I do have to talk about this. I have to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. As someone who is a tech podcaster, it pretty much is a topic that must be discussed. But first, before we get into the topic itself, I'm going to give you a brief history of both where I stand on net neutrality, because this is an opinion-based show, and a bit of the history of net neutrality. All right? I do support the core concept of net neutrality. The core concept itself is that ISPs should get your permission in order to sell your information. Other websites should get your permission in order to sell your information. And that ISPs cannot throttle down sites you want to get to. That's the core concept. Alright? Now, that last part is what scares a lot of people. The thing is that second part rarely happens. A lot of people thought it was happening when Netflix first arrived on the scene, but the real problem was the fact that a lot of the infrastructure wasn't ready for Netflix. Now I was talking about petabytes of information, hundreds and hundreds of petabytes of video streaming content going over an ISP infrastructure that just wasn't ready for that kind of consumption. And that's when net neutrality really started getting its push. This was about 4 years ago. Now, as much as I'm in support of net neutrality, the way it was being pushed forward first, I thought was very suspicious. And that was demanding the FCC take regulatory control over the internet and assume authority. That never made sense to me. Because in the end, if all you wanted were those three things, you'd push for a law to get passed. And I still believe that's the correct way to do it. So 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago now, then President Obama's FCC declared that the internet is a utility and assumed regulatory control over it. There was no vote. There was no anything. There was no representation at all. The FCC just went ahead and decided the internet's the same as a power line, and we have power over it now. It was then that they put out a list of rules that then got called net neutrality. Fast forward a year. That political party then, the Democrats lose power, Republicans are in. And the new FCC that came in with it said, we do not want this power. And then began to push and said that we are going to repeal these own rules and give the internet back to the way it was before the previous FCC decided that it's a utility. It was then that the hype began, where everyone everywhere decided that the current FCC is terrible and they are going to give rise to the end of the internet. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. The amount of hatred towards the current FCC chairman, who I forgot whose name it is, but it doesn't matter. You can look up on Twitter. People are calling for his death. That is way over the line. Well, this last Thursday, the vote was in. Those in charge of the FCC, the vote was 4-3 to repeal net neutrality. Now a congressional order goes through to be in support or disapprove of the FCC's decision. That really doesn't matter a whole lot because the FCC can still just do as they please. So even if the Congress says that we think what you did is terrible, they're still going to do it. Because Congress really has no power over the FCC. That's an administrative branch. So, is this the end of the internet? No. Not even close. Are your favorite sites going to get blocked? No. That is an absurd claim. Do you need to move to Canada to go do what you've always wanted on the internet? No. Because here's the thing that everyone's forgetting. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, was already overseeing the internet since the dawn of the internet. everyone's saying, oh my god, they're going to block access to my YouTubes or whatever. Oh, those Twitch creators won't be able to stream anymore. It can get blocked by my ISP. First off, it'd be the stupidest thing in the world for an ISP to block any website, because it guarantees they'd lose customers. It guarantees it. Second, the FTC would guaranteed step in for unfair practices. So yeah, that's one of the big things that nobody seems to want to acknowledge. For what reason they don't want to acknowledge this, I don't know. Because anyone can look this up. I've been preaching this for what feels like 17 years. Now, a couple days ago, it was brought to my attention a bill that is being pushed through right now in Washington State that pretty much would re-put into place net neutrality, at least in the state. And I've gone through the bill. All of these bills, I do recommend you look them up and read through line by line by line by line. Yeah, that's a lot of reading. Yeah, it's really annoying. But that's how you make sure a bill actually says what people says it says. Because a lot of people will just say, oh yeah, this is the Free Puppy Act, and then find out the Free Puppy Act murders puppies. So yeah, you read the bill, it's only 3 pages. Not even kidding, it is only 3 pages. And the last page is definitions. And yeah, sure enough, this is just straight up net neutrality. This is the right way to do it, too. Put a bill forward that says exactly what it does and have it go into law. I wish this bill was going through the federal system right now. Unfortunately, this is only for the state of Washington. This bill, if you want to look it up, it's House Bill 2282 for the state of Washington 65th Legislature, 2018 regular session. So, yeah, that's nice. I wish this was going through, but, you know, it's not. Unjust Man in the chat is saying that Reddit told him that everything's doomed. It's not just Reddit. Everywhere is saying that everything's doomed, and as I said before, it could not be further from the truth. Although, here's probably my favorite piece. Here's my favorite piece from everyone who is for net neutrality and up in arms being the doomsayers, saying that the FCC is out of line in changing their own rules. Spoiler, they're not out of line in changing their own rules. Spoilers. In fact, they were actually out of line in the first place, trying to treat the internet the same as power lines in order to put net neutrality in. Shh, don't tell them that. This letter from the Department of Justice, including how many attorney generals? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16 different state attorney generals. All right? This is my personal favorite. The fact that this letter even exists. I'm trying to get to the exact paragraph in this. Here, it starts, Dear Chairman Pai, Commissioners Clybourne, O'Reilly, Carr, and Rosenworcel. I apologize for the sound of the vacuum. Someone's vacuuming downstairs, or into the hallway. But regardless. What are most important rules? They're going over and saying how important they are. Recent attempts by New York Attorney General Schneiderman to investigate supposed concerns received by the FCC revealed a pattern of facts that should raise alarm bells for every American about the integrity of the democratic process. A careful review of the publicly available information revealed a pattern of fake submissions using the names of real people. In fact, there may be over 1 million fake submissions from across the country. This is akin to identity theft on a main scale. And the theft of someone's voice in a democracy is particularly concerning. So, the letter is trying to claim that there's tons of identity theft inputting their own opinions into the FCC. Okay. There's just one problem with that. This isn't a vote. This isn't a public vote. This is, again, the FCC changing their own rules. On top of that, this is just declaring that there may be millions of fake submissions. There's no actual citation of the review or anything of this sort, or reasons why they believe that this occurred. They are simply declaring that this happened and everything must stop and grind to a halt and get to the bottom of this. And of course, if you go through and look at all the names that have signed this, all of them are Democratic Attorney Generals. This entire letter is just plain politics. This is one of the problems I have with politics, is the fact that letters like this, which should only be written in actual cases of actual concern, just being used to be a talking point. This letter exists for the purpose of existing. Here's the long and short of this. Although I support net neutrality, I also support the repeal of the way net neutrality is put into place. Because an organization like the FCC can, in fact, the moment they assume control over something, just decide without anyone's vote, without anyone's opinion, how to treat it. The fact that the FCC has relinquished their control over the internet is great news. Just let only the FTC worry about everything being fair. You don't need two heads butting against each other. You just don't. And every single... I'm trying to think of the right word, because a lot of them are smart people, but are being fooled by idiots. All these people going on and on and on and on and on about how the internet is doomed, how everything is over, and how everything you ever loved about the internet is over because a set of rules that were put into place 2 years ago have been repealed. Is simply not thinking at all. Because here's a spoiler alert. If the internet could have blocked whatever it wanted from the get-go, 4chan would have never existed since 2002. Reddit would have never came into existence. Two of the big... Tumblr would have never come into existence. 3 of the biggest cesspools of ideological toxicity would have never occurred. All of them came into existence before the existence of net neutrality. And now that net neutrality is gone, which has only existed for 2 years, between the end of 2015 and the end of 2017, trust me, the world will keep turning. And the amount of people who want to keep declaring that everything is over, that the internet is over, and that we should all move to not the USA, really, that's the worst part about this. It's not the fact that one guy, who was the chairman, said went and did what he said he was going to do. It's all the people that want to say it's all over and that they wish that one guy was dead. That is the real problem. So please, I beg you, anyone who is hearing my voice, please let the net neutrality topic die for now. Because although it is a concept that I support, it has been shanghaied and taken over by a force that clearly has no idea what they're doing and doesn't actually want net neutrality. They just want to cause trouble. There. I'm done talking about net neutrality for at least the rest of the year. I really do hope I never, ever talk about net neutrality again. Or at least if I do talk about it again, I don't want to talk about it in this context. It is simply the worst. It really is. Take care, see you next week. Bye-bye!